the bicycle repairman, and the delivery revolution. In a narrow alley of the city, where morning sunlight touched old brick walls and vendors called out their first customers, there lived a humble bicycle repairman named Tam. He spent his days patching tires, tightening chains, and fixing squeaky pedals. His hands were rough, his clothes always stained with grease, but his smile was warm, the kind that made people trust him without words. The city around him was changing. Shops were opening everywhere. Deliveries became busier, and yet the same problem remained. Trucks couldn't enter the maze of narrow alleys. Packages were delayed, shop owners sighed, and everyone repeated the same phrase: "You can't deliver without a truck." Tam listened quietly, but he looked at those twisting alleys, places he knew like the lines of his palms, and a small spark lit up in his mind. If bicycles could carry goods, why not? That night, as the neighborhood slept, Tam stayed in his dimly lit workshop. He welded pieces of iron together, sparks flying across the floor. A basket slowly took shape. Strong enough to hold boxes, light enough to move fast. He mounted it behind his old bicycle and whispered proudly, "Let's see if this old friend can do something new." The next morning, he loaded the basket with dry goods from a nearby shop. People laughed as he rode away. Bicycle delivery? That's impossible. Tam just smiled. If we never try, how would we know? He pedaled through the winding alleys where trucks couldn't enter and motorbikes got stuck. The wheels turned smoothly, the boxes didn't fall, and before long, he arrived. The shop owner blinked in surprise. "You're here already?" Tam wiped the sweat off his forehead. Small roads, small bikes. That's how you win the race. News spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Soon, everyone knew about the bicycle deliveryman. At first, people hired him out of curiosity. Then, they kept coming back because he was fast, careful, and always on time. The alleys, once filled with silence, now rang with the cheerful ding-ding of bicycle bells. One afternoon, a man in a neat suit stopped by Tam's shop. He owned a large grocery store. "I've heard about your service," he said. "Can you deliver for me?" Tam nodded. That delivery was heavier and farther than any before. He left at dawn, pedaled under the rising sun, swerved through traffic, and reached the destination ahead of schedule. The store owner looked at his watch, impressed. "You're faster than motorbikes." Well done. From that day on, Tam's orders grew, not just from one shop, but from many. And something unexpected happened. The people who once laughed at him now came asking for advice. He didn't keep the idea to himself. He taught others how to build baskets, balance goods, and maintain their bikes. Before long, dozens of riders were zipping through the alleys with boxes strapped to their bicycles. A journalist eventually heard about the movement and wrote an article titled, "The Bicycle Repairman Who Started a Delivery Revolution." That story spread beyond the neighborhood. Soon, people began calling it a new delivery model. The fast green alley delivery. An innovation born not from a boardroom, but from a small workshop smelling of oil and iron. One golden afternoon, Tam sat outside a shop watching the sunset. His bicycle stood beside him, old, rusty, but full of stories. He ran his hand along its frame, smiling softly. If he had followed the crowd back then, nothing would have changed. A young boy passing by stopped and asked, "Uncle Tam, why don't you buy a new bike?" Tam chuckled, "Because this one reminds me that I didn't have to follow others to go far." Sometimes, to find a new path, You just have to look at things differently." The boy nodded thoughtfully and rode away, his bell ringing like a tiny echo of Tam's journey. He watched as the child disappeared into the maze of alleys, and for a moment, Tam's heart swelled with quiet pride. Years later, a startup company launched a green bicycle delivery service. Inspired by his idea, they called him to thank him, the man who had started it all with nothing but courage and creativity. And in that simple moment, Tam realized something profound. Innovation doesn't always come from the powerful, the rich, or the educated. Sometimes it begins with someone ordinary, someone who dares to think differently. Final message: you don't always need a truck to start a revolution. Sometimes all it takes is a bicycle and the courage to see the world differently. The teacher and the class without a blackboard. In a quiet mountain village where red dirt roads wound through misty valleys, stood a tiny school built from wood and tin. Inside, there was only one classroom, and in it, a single old blackboard. Its surface was cracked and faded, but to the children, it was magic. Every morning they gathered eagerly, waiting for the sound of chalk scratching on that board, the rhythm of learning, the melody of hope. One morning, their teacher walked in silently. His eyes were calm, his hands holding a small box of matches. The children looked at him puzzled. Without a word, he walked up to the blackboard, placed his hand gently upon it, and whispered, "Do you know what we truly learn with?" "With the board, teacher," the class replied cheerfully. He smiled faintly. "No, my children. We learn with our minds and our hearts." Before anyone could understand, he struck a match. The small flame flickered, then caught onto the wooden frame. The board began to burn. Flames danced and crackled, the room filled with smoke and gasps. "Teacher, stop! That's our only board," a child cried. But the teacher only watched, eyes glimmering in the firelight, not with madness, but with conviction. When the flames died, only ashes remained. He turned to the stunned class and said softly, "From today on, we will learn without a board. You will see lessons not on wood and chalk, but in your imagination, in stories, in life, in each other." The days that followed were confusing. No chalk, no letters on the wall, just a blank space and the teacher's voice. The children sat still, afraid they could no longer learn. "Teacher," one finally asked, "how can we learn without writing?" He smiled and began a story. There once was a little bird who was afraid to fly. He watched others soar into the sky but never dared to spread his wings. Until one day, the wind whispered, "You will never know your strength until you try." The children listened, eyes wide. When the bird finally flew, the teacher continued, he realized the sky had always been waiting for him. From that day on, every lesson became a story. Geography turned into journeys across mountains and rivers. History became tales of heroes and dreamers. Math was taught through games with stones, leaves, and laughter. Slowly, the fear faded. The children stopped asking for the blackboard. They began to draw on the ground, to describe with words, to imagine with colors in their minds. Learning became alive, not memorized, but felt. One morning, the teacher asked, "What did we learn yesterday?" A little girl stood up, her face bright. "We learned about rivers, teacher. You said a river always begins small, twists through rocks, and flows to the sea, just like us. We'll have to go through struggles before we reach our dreams." The teacher's eyes softened. He didn't need to say a word. Weeks passed. The class had changed completely. Each child began telling their own stories. Some spoke with emotion. Some drew pictures in the dirt. Some acted out entire lessons. The classroom, once quiet and rigid, now echoed with imagination and joy. When inspectors from the district came to visit, they were shocked. There was no blackboard. "Teacher," one asked sternly, "why would you remove the most important teaching tool?" The teacher looked at the children and replied, "Because I don't want them to only learn to look at a board. I want them to learn to look at the world." The room fell silent. They stayed to listen. And as the children spoke about what they'd learned, not from books but from stories and life, the visitors could only nod in awe. At the end of the school year, the children came to say goodbye. A small boy approached the teacher holding a drawing made on a torn piece of paper. "Teacher," he said shyly, "I think the blackboard isn't gone. It's still here, inside our heads." The teacher placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, smiling warmly. "Yes," he said softly. "Knowledge isn't written on wood or stone. It's written in the mind and in the heart. That's the place no fire can ever burn." The wind blew gently through the window. The golden ashes of the old blackboard lifted into the air, shimmering in the sunlight like dust made of dreams. And from that moment on, the legend of the class without a blackboard spread across the mountains. A story of courage, imagination, and change. Because sometimes, to truly learn, you must first dare to unlearn. Sometimes, to ignite the light of understanding, you must first set fire to the things that keep you in the dark. Message: true learning begins when we stop depending on tools and start using our imagination. To teach from the heart is to awaken the fire of curiosity that no blackboard can ever contain.